everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing my January wrap-up. Already the first month of the year is gone and it's kind of crazy to think about that. It doesn't feel like it should be February already, but it is. So I was able to read 8 books this month and start on 2 extra ones, which I will hopefully be finishing in February, so I'll talk about those next month. But let's get into those 8 books that I finished reading. So the first book I read was The Future of Another Timeline by Annalee Neswitz. This is an adult sci-fi novel, and it's following 2 different timelines, one which is set in 1992 in SoCal during the punk era, and the other timeline is in 2022, which was a future timeline. And this novel mainly follows one woman who is traveling between time, and her friends are trying to fix the timeline because in the present, abortion is illegal and it's only going to get worse for women's rights in the future, so they are trying to stop that from happening. So there's the sci-fi speculative elements, there's like that literary stuff, there's themes, and on top of that, along with like all the plot and thematic stuff, this book really does focus in on its characters and them dealing with their own issues. It's a really fun novel because it does have like that fighting for a bigger cause thing, which you see in a lot of like sci-fi and fantasy novels, but it also has a closer story that is closer to the characters who are pretty messy and really trying to figure things out for themselves. And I really liked this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It worked really well for me. I found it to be a really enjoyable read, a really complex read. It just wasn't my new favorite read of all time, so I gave it a 4 instead of a 5-star. And this book was also a part of a reading vlog in which I was reading books suggested by the Penguin Hotline, and you can check out that video if you're interested in more of my thoughts and opinions on this book and the other books that the Penguin Hotline suggested for me. The next book I read was Girls of Fate and Fury by Natasha Ning, and this is the 3rd and final book in the Girls of Paper and Fire trilogy series, and this is a young adult fantasy series mainly following our main character Lei as she is recruited to become a paper girl, which is basically like a concubine for the Demon King. The story takes place in an Asian inspired fantasy world and it is a female romance. Overall, this series is okay. The first book was a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I just love what it did. It felt very different from what other YA fantasies were doing at the time. It just felt really unique and I really liked how complex and deep it was. I got really attached to the main characters and their romance, but again, it just felt really unique and fresh, and I really liked how it explored themes of sexual assault and sexual violence. Unfortunately, the second book didn't really do it for me. I rounded this down to like a 2.5 stars. It felt very typical YA fantasy, kind of like defeat the villain, we have to raise an army kind of a thing, have to go on a quest that doesn't really matter kind of a thing, have to go through that book 2 breakup, and unfortunately the 3rd book kind of followed into the same trap as the second book for me. It was a very typical 3rd book in a YA fantasy series. Defeat the villain, getting our forces together, the 2 main characters separated being reunited and fixing their issues. I gave this a 3-star. I think it was slightly more enjoyable than the second book, but overall I was just kind of okay about it. I really liked how this was 2 perspectives versus 1 perspective like the other books in the series, and I really liked that Ren was dealing with like chronic pain, which the author also deals with. I thought that like disability rep was really interesting and really well done. But overall, again, the first book was just so amazing. It felt so fresh. And unfortunately, the second and the 3rd book just fell flat and they just felt very typical. And I couldn't really like root for the characters or the romance because I didn't feel as invested. Spoiler alert for this series, but in my opinion, I wish the Demon King had been defeated in the first book, that was a plot line that was over, and that the book series either remained a standalone or the second and the 3rd book were elevating the stakes, going in a new direction, that the new politics and stuff that the characters were encountering were new, and that the world was developing and elevating itself. I think that would have been a lot more beneficial to the series instead of defeating the king again and again and again. So yes, I would recommend the first book. You can kind of read it as a standalone if you want, with kind of like just an ambiguous ending. And the series, I think a lot of people will enjoy. It's a fine YA fantasy series. Again, it just doesn't do anything exceptional. The 3rd book I read was Winterkeep by Kristen Cashore, and this I gave a 3.75 stars to, but I really like this book. I thought I was going to give this book a 4-star, but the ending unfortunately just didn't tie some of those loose ends that I wanted tied. It felt like the book could have been a little bit longer. So Winterkeep is a spin-off slash companion book to the Graceling Realm series by Kristin Cashore, which she has been writing since like 2008. Each book in the series follows a different main character, but Winterkeep is really different in that there's multiple perspectives. You get a couple familiar faces, and then you get a new character who is Lavisa, and I love Lavisa. She is such an interesting character, and I really liked following her because I loved her, and it felt like her story wasn't completed by the end of the novel. That's where I was a little bit sad at the ending. It really felt like Lavisa's story was just beginning and that she was just realizing things and growing into herself, and so I would have loved another extra 100 pages about her, or just like another extra novel about her. We are getting another Graceling book, but it is following a different character. I'm hoping Lavisa shows up because, again, I would really like to see more of her. But overall, this is a really fun and really fresh YA series. It's a really old YA series, but I think it still stands up to the test of time. Each of the book is really character driven. There is like plot stuff, political intrigue stuff going on, but it really is focused on the main characters growing into their own as a young woman. Each of the main characters feels really, really different. They have their own priorities and motivations going on, and I think that's what makes these books stand out to me. I think a lot of people would find these books slow moving, that the plots kind of go in weird directions or even like tangents of themselves, but that's what I really love about this series. It just explores things in ways that you wouldn't expect. And so again, this is a series I really, really hold dearly and that I really love, and I wish that the ending came through for me. The other thing that I didn't super love in this book was the relationship between Gideon and Bitterblue. Gideon is an interesting character because we have seen him before in the Graceling Realm series, and it kind of alludes to his past and his like not so great behavior, but it never really addresses it, which I thought was interesting slash weird. I really wish that the novel had made more of an effort to show Gideon's growth than just kind of like telling us about it. I don't think I connected him to the character that he was in Graceling until like the end of the novel. It's weird because I really like the dynamic and relationship between him and Bitterblue. It's very much like this noble like knight laying down himself for his queen kind of a thing, which is a dynamic I really love, and I really like how those two characters keep themselves in check with each other. But there is a really big age gap between the characters, like 8-10 years, which made me a little uncomfy even though Bitterblue is an adult in this book. She's still a pretty young adult. She's like 23, which is younger than me. And so seeing her with like a 28-year-old man, 32-year-old man, I think he's 32, was just a little off-putting to me. Again, I liked their dynamic. I just don't understand why they had to have the romantic part of the relationship, and to me it just wasn't my favorite thing to read about. Even though I did really enjoy both of the characters and their relationship dynamic, I didn't necessarily want to see them romantically together. So overall, Winter's Keep was a really fun read. I really like this series, and I'm really excited that Kristin Cashore is writing more books in this series. The next book I read was The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, which is the fourth and final book in the Wayfarers companion series. This is an adult sci-fi series, and the subgenre for the series is hope punk. So it is a more hopeful take on the sci-fi genre. And so this book is like a very cozy slice of life story, and it's basically like about a motel on this like deserted, almost barren landscape planet. And so all these people are coming into this like motel kind of situation to wait out their turn so that they can take the wormhole to a different location. It's kind of like a pit stop. And so all of these characters that are coming in to go to different places get stuck at this like motel's pit stop situation, and they're kind of put together, and they all have to deal with each other even though they're different species. They have different politics, different motivations and ideas, and so it's really, really fun and really, really sweet. This book is really interesting from Becky Chambers' other books because it has an all-alien cast. There are no human characters, no human perspectives, and this one, like the third book, is also multiple perspectives, so we get multiple characters going through their day-to-day lives, and we see a couple familiar faces but mostly new characters, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It just really worked for me. It was sweet and nice, but there was also a lot of tension, and it didn't feel overly sweet. There is a child character, but I thought it was played up very well. A lot of times children characters can come off as really corny, cheesy, not well done, but I think this character was a really good balance of like being an annoying kid while also being like a sweet person who kind of brings the group together. And I feel like this book could be perceived as corny by other readers, but for me it just really, really worked. I think it just had a really good balance of tension and character dynamics, and again, it's about characters getting along. There's nothing super serious happening, and I really loved it for that aspect. It was really, really excellent, and I just love this series entirely. Like, there's not a book that doesn't work for me in this series. It's just a perfect sci-fi series for me, and I really, really love it, and I would really recommend it if you like character growth at the center of a story versus plot. The next book I read was Lore Olympus Olympus Volume 1, and this is a reread for me. I have been reading the Lore Olympus series kind of off and on Webtoon for a while, and I really enjoy it. I think it's a fun, good comic series. I like the art a lot, and as someone who has been reading mangas for the past like 15 years, I'm kind of used to going on and off series as they take time to put out new chapters every week. I'm just used to like that kind of slow pace, and for it to be years and years and years to only build up to 3 weeks in the comic. So yeah, I really enjoyed this reread. I really like the series and I'm excited for the next book. But if you don't know, Lore Olympus is a pretty popular webcomic, and it is following the Greek gods. On Earth it is like ancient Greek times, but on Mount Olympus, where most of the book takes place, it is like a modern setting. And this is a Persephone Hades retelling, and our main character is Persephone, who is a young goddess still coming into her own, trying to figure out what she wants from life separate from her helicopter parent. And the series deals with a lot of themes, in particular sexual assault and sexual violence. And again, this is a very slow moving comic, really exploring the characters' feelings as they develop and the relationships and how they develop. So as someone who is a fan of Greek retellings, I enjoy this one. The next book I read was Where We Go From Here by Lucas Rocha, and this is a YA contemporary novel, and it's also a Brazilian translated novel. So it was originally, I believe, in Portuguese, but this novel deals with 3 main perspectives who are all connected to AIDS or HIV. One of our main characters has just learned that he's contracted it. Another character has just realized his boyfriend has HIV and is going in to get tested. And our other main character is the said boyfriend who has HIV and who lives with it. So this is a really interesting novel. We get to see like how the characters interact and how they intersect. And then we also get to see obviously how they're dealing with their own lives and how they're dealing with HIV. This is set in modern times, so it's really interesting to see a more contemporary piece done about living with AIDS. And I think this novel does a really great job of talking about HIV and AIDS while also like acknowledging the history and impact of it. But it also again is very much about these characters living their lives, intersecting and coming together. It's really cute, it's really fun. There are some content warnings for like homophobia, prejudice against HIV and AIDS, and there is someone outing someone with the disease at the end of the book via social media, which becomes the main plot point of the climax. I thought this book did a really good job of balancing like information with the characters, and I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. It was really well done, and also the translation was really smooth. I thought it worked really, really well, and I would definitely recommend this if you're looking for a YA contemporary that's hard-hitting and talks about topics, but also has a fun, joyful side to it as well. Another book I read was Yoke by Mary H.K. Choi, and this is the 3rd book by Mary H.K. Choi that I have read and that I also believe she was published. And Yoke is another YA / maybe new adult contemporary novel, and it follows one young woman as she reconnects with her sister, and both of them are living in New York City with very, very different lives. And like all of Mary H.K. Choi's books, the main characters are messy, they do a lot of things that they probably shouldn't, they make a lot of mistakes, but they slowly grow and learn throughout the series. And this book deals with a lot of hard-hitting topics. Again, it's a hard-hitting contemporary novel. The main content warnings I would give for this book are eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia, self-destructive behavior, sexual assault, unhealthy family dynamics, and then cancer. I don't know if it's a spoiler to say this, but the main character finds out that her sister has cancer, which is what brings them together to reconnect with one another. And I really liked this. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It really, really worked for me. I loved the messy dynamics. I loved seeing these 2 sisters come together. I sort of wish that the romance wasn't in the book. I feel like I could have dealt without it. I thought it was cute. I liked the characters. I liked the dynamic. But I was really content with just having the sister story, so I don't know if we really needed it. But overall, this was a really, really good novel, and I continue to love Mary H.K. Choi's work. And the final novel I read in January was Kikis Delivery Service, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars to. Kikis Delivery Service is most known for being a beloved children's movie done by my favorite animator and film director, Hayao Miyazaki. And Kikis Delivery Service, the book, is the original source material for that. Kikis Delivery Service is more of a vignette style following Kiki's adventures, so the story elements don't all super connect like they do in the movie, but you can definitely feel and see the inspiration in the novel. And again, this is another translated work. This got translated in 2020, so it's a very recent translation, but I was really excited to get to read it and see this translation. And overall, it's a really fun, sweet story, a great children's novel, but it's not like an all-time favorite for me, and I don't think it sticks with me as much as the movie does, just because, again, it's that vignette style, so there isn't like that culmination of events like there is in the movie. One of the most notable differences is that while like the growing up story of Kiki is really important to both the book and the movie, the book also deals with this theme of modern versus tradition. I really liked how that played out in the story. That theme is kind of there in the movie, it's kind of hinted at, but it's not as important as it is in the book, and I really liked how that theme played out in the book. And I would say one of the big themes of the movie that doesn't really have any foundation in the novel is like art block, or just kind of that feeling of not loving something when you start doing it for work, and like losing your love of something, losing your spirit for something, which is one of the main reasons why I love the movie so much, but I could see why it wouldn't be in the book because it doesn't really work as much in the book. But overall, this was really fun. It was really cute. I do think that the translation is a little clunky in some sections, and I would highly recommend listening to the audiobook for this. I read half of the book physically and then I switched to audio, and I think it really made a difference. She really does an excellent job of trying to bring the story to life, so I would highly recommend that format. But yeah, it's a cute, fun, coming-of-age novel, really sweet, and it was fun to read a source material for a movie I love so much. But yeah, that's going to do it for my January wrap-up. Those are all the books I read. Across the board, I didn't really hate anything, which is great, and I possibly have a new favorite because, again, I love Becky Chambers' work. Again, thank you so much for watching. If you made it through this entire video, leave me a comment down below. I would love to know what you read this month, what you loved this month. But again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.